So I've talked to many of you, actually, so fantastic. Okay, community to me means using your voice in a way that's true to you and your goals. So we're going to try something that might be a little new for you. So we're going to do a thing where I'm going to make a sound, and then you're going to make the sound. And let's just try that first. So I'm going to go, woo! Woo! Yes. Okay, let's just do it one more time to make sure you got it. Woo! Woo! Okay, so you're following along. Very good. So if this is true, then you're going to make that same sound that you just made. So if you follow Gohar and Amy. Woo! It's working. Okay, if you met somebody new tonight. Woo! Wow, okay. If you have classes that may challenge you this fall. Woo! Okay, very good. If you, who here is in college? Okay. Nice. I've already talked to you all. Okay, very good. And if you are open to new ways of studying. Yes, okay. So, finally, if you are excited for what's next. Wow, you're getting so much better at this each time. Okay, without further ado, Thea's founder, Baker Bruce. Woo! Yeah.
Let me make sure I'm not. That's what I want to make sure of. Okay. Well, first off, I would just like to say that I'm a huge fan of Gohar and Amy, both of them. Have impacted my life in more ways than they know, actually. I've watched every single one of Gohar's short-form content videos and most of Amy's long format study tips, study habit videos. And that especially happened in my junior year. And from that, I kind of realized that there's no good online study applications for me, especially ones that mainly focus on understanding the material itself. And so then throughout my junior year, I kind of started coding a project. And by the end of it, I had the first kind of working version of Thea Study. And it was kind of just built for me, something that really focuses, rather than on the memorization like most of the applications out there, on the understanding of the material itself. Mainly teaching you, like if you were to study the Roaring Twenties, for example, that's FDR, that's the New Deal, that's Herbert Hoover, the Great Depression. It truly teaches you, like, okay, you know the New Deal, FDR, okay, they're ex-president, and this is what the New Deal was, but it really teaches you, well, why did the New Deal happen? Well, why was FDR elected? What were the causes and effects of the New Deal? Stuff like that. Something that gives you big intuition around the topic itself. Using AI to kind of tutor you through that, through explanations and questions and study guides, etc. Something that I kind of really, really enjoyed using just to help throughout the study process. And so that was basically by the end of the summer. And then moving on throughout the summer, I kind of worked on it all the time, weekdays, weekends. It was fun. It was just coding. And by the end of the summer, we had a team of 8, and then I decided to take the year off of school. So I dropped out of high school and then committed full-time to Thea. Then 7 months later, I'm working as a junior software developer in a company of 20, and we got users in 200 countries and territories all over the world studying law, economics, from basically the highest level you could go just down to like middle school or high school level. And so I urge you to check it out and to try to implement it in your study routine this coming fall, as a lot of students have. Thank you.
All right, so hi everyone, my name is Gohar. So I upload, as all of you guys know, study advice to YouTube, along with college application advice, financial advice. I've really broadened my niche over the past couple of years. And my story, to put it really shortly, is I graduated from MIT back in 2021. I double majored in computer science and business analytics, and I did not consider myself to become a content creator at all. I very much expected myself to graduate from college and go into software engineering, but I'm super grateful for the path that life has taken me these past few years, and super grateful for the community that we have built, and extremely, extremely grateful that you guys decided to show up tonight for this event. So thank you so much. Super excited to see and meet more of you guys tonight and to answer your questions.
So, cool. Hello? Okay. Hi everyone, thank you so much to Gohar for doing this with me. I think that's the amazing thing about the internet. It's that we can meet amazing people like everyone in this room who we would not have known otherwise. So for those who don't know, I'm Amy. I am also a content creator primarily on YouTube, but I do some short form on Instagram. And I currently recently launched a podcast called Your A Plus Life, where I talk more about life advice and general self-development. So on my YouTube channel, that's where I discuss study tips, but going beyond that, it's about how we can succeed academically with skills that will also help us in life and after college, after school, and in our jobs and in our relationships. So essentially this meeting today, well, this event, not a meeting, will be where we answer some of your questions to help you get back to school. And oh yeah, for context, I attended Caltech where I majored in chemical engineering. And like Gohar, I did not think that I would be very creative or do any more risk-averse entrepreneurial paths. But I think that's what's so amazing about life when you take the risk and then believe in your own ability to succeed no matter where you go. Okay, awesome. So we will start the Q&A now. Okay, first question, how can I be the best me and get all A's this school year? I'm gonna start.
Sure. So I feel like this is the question that we all want to know the answer to, right? I feel like this is very much the essence of my channel, Amy's channel. So I think being the best self or being the best version of yourself this school year comes down to a few key principles. The first of which is to make sure that you have some sort of system in place. I think the students who do the best academically enter each school year with some sort of organization system in place. They know their tools, they know what resources they need to refer to. And so given that the school year is still a couple weeks out, I would definitely recommend using some sort of planning tool, whether it's Google Calendar, Notion, Todoist, using AI tools like Thea to help you, to help propel your academic career this fall. But I also recommend that if you want to be the best version of yourself this school year, I highly encourage you to try new things. So if, for example, I know a lot of you are entering high school this fall, I highly encourage that you guys try out as many activities as you can for the first maybe month or two and figure out what you like, figure out what you love, and then dial it down. Stick to the 1 to 2 things that you know resonate with you and that you want to continue for the rest of high school, because that passion eventually will show through when it's time to apply to college and help you succeed.
Yeah, I think Gohar gave an amazing answer, which makes sense because his content's amazing. So I think that we have to remember the core of the question is like, how do I be the best me? So peer pressure is really tough. Like I remember struggling with that a lot as well, but it's just to stick to your values and know what you're interested in and not let anyone dampen that kind of passion. And my number one tip across the board for being the best you in any kind of situation is just to be mindful of how precious your time is. Because when you cut out the things that are obstacles, then you will be magically able to achieve way more than you thought you could. So, okay, next question, how to survive the first day of high school as a freshman? Okay, I will start answering this. So as a freshman, you might be entering school where no one really knows you yet. So I think that it's a great chance to become your ideal self, like whoever you want to be. So I know I was really shy in middle school, but going into freshman is a fresh new start where I can become more outgoing. I can talk to the upperclassmen sitting in front of me. I can just pretend like I'm someone who no one knows I am yet, because that's whoever I want to be, I can become that person. So I think that's one of my biggest advice, and that kind of goes for college as well. Preparation as far as before your first day. So making the first day great does not just come on the day you enter. It also comes with the preparation, just like you're doing right now.
I think Amy answered that beautifully. I think she very much covered the core of what I would say as well. So the first day of freshman year, I think it kind of ties back into the original answer I gave in terms of just figuring out what your systems are going to be. But also I would say your first week of high school, don't put too much pressure on yourself to figure it out right from the get-go. I think it's important that you know what tools you want to use. It's important to know how your classes are, how your teachers are, but give yourself the first day and also like the first 2 weeks of high school, just to get a sense of how hard your classes actually are, what your teachers are actually like, to get a sense of all the opportunities that are available to you. I also just highly encourage you in high school to experiment a lot more. I've talked about this in a couple of my videos, but I feel like in middle school, people tend to be a little judgmental. And when I think back to my middle school years, you know, I feel like there's always like this sense of trying to fit in and trying to be cool and trying to figure out, you know, how can you be like the other people around you? But I think in high school and beyond, and especially in college, is when people really begin to forge their own paths. So see high school as this opportunity to really lean into what you love and to not really care too much about the thoughts of others, to be honest. Okay, so I think my answer also touched upon this a little bit. How can I get farther ahead than everybody within the first week? Mental, physical, academic. So on the one end, I think thinking of high school in this like competitive lens is helpful to a degree, but then I also encourage you to not think about it as like a stark competition with people around you, but rather as a competition with yourself. Try to just get better and better each and every single day, whether it's in the form of sticking to habits that you want to get into, whether it's sleeping early, waking up early, making sure that you get enough sunlight each day, trying to exercise a couple times a week. I would say go into the school year, figure out what habits you want to form, set up a habit tracker, and then make sure that you're sticking to these goals as consistently as you can, and you'll see progress faster than you can imagine.
Yeah, so I think that when it comes to getting ahead of everyone, something I really like to think of is using everything to your advantage. So if something goes wrong, use it to your advantage. If something goes right, what did you learn and how can you replicate that success again? And consider the people around you, those who you want to see whether they will lift you up or they hold you back. So that's why your environment and selecting the right friend group is really important, such that you shouldn't feel competitive with your immediate friend group. It's better that everyone's helping each other, because only together can you actually go farther than if you were working on things individually. Okay, so next question. How do I adjust to college life? How difficult is the college workload? And how competitive is the college environment? How do I adjust being in a rural area when I grew up in cities? So I think the core of this question is how do you adjust to the college life, which is very different than high school, of course. So I remember struggling a lot when I went to college because the workload was just significantly higher, as I imagine for Gohar as well, going to MIT. So I think for me, the biggest part was kind of like I've been touching upon the theme for here. It's just like you need to find your people. And to do that, you have this sense of like, hey, I would love if someone came up to me and said, hi, who are you? My name is Amy. So why don't you be that person to other people? I'm sure that no one will turn you down. And if they do, then you know they're probably not the right friend to have. So I think that's the very golden mindset in order to make those friends and to find the group that will help you through it. Because even when times are tough, I found that it was my friends I made in college that made adjusting to everything, to every part of this question easier.
I think Amy touched upon that perfectly. And honestly, the jump from high school to college is extremely drastic, more so than the jump from middle school to high school, because as soon as you get into college, you are treated like an adult. You are expected to wake up on your own time, live on your own terms, be responsible for your own success and outcomes. And so when you go to college, I would say the first thing that Amy touched upon is try to be as open as possible to meeting people. Genuinely, within the first month of college, everyone is as lost as you are. And if you go up to someone random and say, hi, my name is so-and-so, do you want to grab lunch or something? I promise you it won't be as weird as you think that might sound. And then also I think in college, try to stay in touch with your parents. So I remember when I went into college, it was just like a very drastically different lifestyle, and so many things were coming my way to the point where I didn't find time for my family, let alone myself. Just make sure you take the time to call your parents, tell them how it's going, and if that's too much, you can even send them a quick text message just to let them know how things are. But college is very much on your own terms. It's an exciting time, but it's also very challenging, especially if you're making the jump from like a small public high school to a very rigorous academic institution like Caltech or MIT. It's quite the jump up, but I'm sure you guys will absolutely crush it. All right. What should I pack? Must-have essentials. How to do research with professors freshman year. So in terms of what to pack, I don't mean to make this an obnoxious self-promo, but I've done like 3 or 4 short-form videos about a lot of like college essentials. So for example, mattress topper, definitely a lifesaver. You want a shower caddy, shower shoes. There's a ton of items. I feel like I'm not going to just sit here and list a lot of them off. But to answer that second question here about research, so chances are your college or what college you go to has a ton of opportunities for freshmen. So for example, at MIT, we had something called the Year Out program, which allowed undergraduates to do research with professors. And this was open to freshmen. And as soon as I got into college, that was one of the opportunities that I tried to seize. So you don't have to go out of your way to find research opportunities. Chances are there's already infrastructure in place for you to do that when you're in college.
Yeah, and just on the research part, be proactive and reach out to people who might not even be accepting students at the time. Like talk to your TA, talk to someone who's an upperclassman who's working with them already. It's much easier to get into a lab if you have warm connections, and it's a great skill to have when you are recruiting for jobs in the future as well. So always be proactive, try to understand the people and the lab, the research before you talk to them. It's always really important to show that you are smart before you, So I think that we'll take a pause and ask if there are any questions from the audience just to get you all involved. So does anyone here have any question they have in mind right now? Just feel free to raise your hand. Yeah.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
My question is, how can I reset my ambitions after experiencing burnout?
Okay, so the question is a really good one. How do you reset your ambitions after experiencing burnout? So I think first of all, with anything that goes in life, we should take some time to reflect. So chances are that if you are burned out, then you truly need that break. So don't feel like you're falling behind when you're taking that break. I know for overachievers, as I'm sure everyone in this room is, that we feel like if we take a break, we're gonna fall behind. But the truth is that when you take a break, you're making yourself even more able to succeed for the next thing you're going to pursue. So never feel bad about taking a break. And for me, I think a break is truly when you go like offline for a while, you connect with your loved ones, you talk with them and truly find your happy place and who you were as a child again. And then you'll be refreshed. And eventually, when you get away from electronics and too many distractions, you will feel so relieved and almost start to get bored that then your next ambition will come to you.
I completely agree. And I also feel like burnout is a very, it's an inevitable part of just having ambitious goals. For example, I can tell you right now, I'm experiencing a little bit of burnout when it comes to short form content. Just trying to think of new ideas every other day is sort of a challenge. But I think throughout the process, what I like to do is just have some sort of North Star that allows me to see where I'm trying to end up. So for example, in high school, as you guys probably know from some of my videos, I entered high school with this mindset that I wanted to end up going to a top school. And did I get burned out during high school? Of course, many times, especially when trying to cram for AP exams the night before, or trying to study for finals. But as Amy said, in those moments, I would often just take a complete step back from what it was I was doing. I would either spend time with family, maybe play some video games, and then I would come back to this with this mindset of what is it that I'm trying to achieve and who am I trying to be 2, 3, 4 years from now. And I would sometimes try to visualize, that final outcome, whether it was getting a good grade, getting into a college, and just having that vision in mind helped my ambition very much to stay in place. And then, any other questions from the crowd? Yep.
How can I make myself stand out from the others in school and like impress my teacher?
That's a great question. So the question is, how can I make myself stand out from the others in school and impress my teachers? So one thing that I quickly learned my freshman year is you have to find this correct balance of, you want to show that you care, but you don't want to try too hard to the point where you're like putting your teacher off a little bit. For example, my freshman year of high school, I remember I asked for extra credit, even though I had a 96 in my history teacher's class, and he looked at me like I was crazy. Like it was not a fun interaction. So I would say, when you enter school, just try to engage in class at least a couple times a week, and try to answer questions that are somewhat convoluted, just to show your teachers that you care and that you're willing to step up to some sort of a challenge. And then I also recommend that whenever you're doing your homework assignments or any assignments, just put in an extra 10%. So for example, when I was in AP Psych, my teacher had me, I think he made us write some sort of report on a psychological concept, and I remember I just bolded some of the words and I added headings instead of just making it a block of text. And I remember he was like, "Gohar, you went above and beyond for this, extra points for you," or something. I was like, "Oh my God, I just added bold text." So I think it's very much the little things that you can do to just try a little bit harder that can help you stand out to your teachers.
Yeah, I think the idea of bolding text and making things very readable is definitely a way to stand out, because if you think of it from the teacher's point of view, they're grading hundreds of assignments throughout their school year, and anything that can make their lives easier, they will love you for. So as a general rule of thumb, whenever you're trying to get to know someone or impress someone, think about their point of view. It's not about you, but it's about them. So what else would teachers love? They would love if students care about who they are as people, not just the person handing them a score. So before I go to class, or at the beginning of class, I would chat with my teacher, ask how their weekend was, start up a conversation. And whenever you start up a conversation and just ask one more question, that can lead you down a road that will lead to new opportunities and to get to know each other on a deeper level. And they could become your best friend or best mentor that you even keep in touch with after high school. So that is my recommendation for how you can stand out. Okay, anyone else have any questions? Yeah.
I want to become an attorney. So for college, I know I don't have to major in law, but would it be best to major in law then get into law school, or should I major in something easier?
Okay, so the question is about whether you should major in law to become an attorney, or major in something easier and then go to law school later. So I personally don't really know this because I never considered law. Do you know?
So I've never considered law school either, but I have a friend who's going to law school this fall, and he did not major in law while in college. In fact, I think many people who end up becoming lawyers or who go to law school, they don't have to study law exactly in college. You can study almost anything you want, really. I think ultimately, from what I understand, I'm not fully versed in this, but as long as you do well enough on the entrance exams for law school, you should be fine. And any other questions? Yep.
How does affirmative action affect certain ethnic groups in college admissions?
Wow, that's quite the question. So the question is, how does affirmative action affect certain ethnic groups in college admissions? So what I'll say is this. Don't worry too much about how race will play a factor in your college application. I think the best thing that you can do is to show colleges that you're passionate about something, whatever that is, to a degree that's greater than the people around you. What I also recommend is, if you're trying to find your interest in high school for your college applications, for example, try to explore the intersection of multiple subjects. And I think, for example, when I was applying to college, I was into computer science, but then also writing in the humanities, and that's what I talked about in my college essays and my college applications, and what I think ultimately allowed me to stand out. So I wouldn't worry too much about the factors that you can't control, but think much more about the narrative that you can build throughout your time in high school to then eventually stand out to college admissions. Anything to add to that, or?
No, that was a great answer. Okay, we'll take another from the audience. So you in the back.
How was your first-hand experience with the SAT or the ACT test, and how did you manage to handle it?
Okay, so the question is, what was my first-hand experience with the ACT or SAT, and how did I handle it? So I very much went into the mindset that I'm only going to take these tests once because they suck. I don't want to do it again, and I don't want to make my parents to pay for it again. So with that attitude of one and done, that's how I would approach my mock exams too. So if I was preparing with practice tests and the skills, when I take my mock test at home, I would treat that as if it's the real one, and then do that until I felt confident about replicating that success on the actual exam.
And so I took the ACT, and the one resource that I used a lot was the ACT official prep guide. But I think more broadly than that is you have to be very rigorous about tackling your mistakes. I think when a lot of students are preparing for the SAT or the ACT, they're very quick to just dismiss mistakes as, oh, that was just a dumb mistake, I won't make that on the exam. When chances are you probably will make that on the exam. So if you make an error on a practice exam, look at the mistake that you made and just write down, like, try to retrace your mental path and be like, okay, this is what I was thinking when I was answering this question. Here's exactly why I got it wrong. Here's where I messed up, and here's how I won't make this mistake again. And that might sound tedious, and yes, it does take time, but if you go through that process as you're preparing for these exams, you will do well.
Yeah, that goes for all tests too.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Oh.
How do you stand out in clubs during high school to secure a leadership role?
That's a great question. So the question was, how do you stand out in clubs during high school to secure a leadership role? So leadership is important to show while you're in school. And I think the key to obtaining these leadership roles is getting started very early. So for example, when I was in high school, I joined a newspaper club my freshman year of high school, showed up to every single meeting, did this for 2-3 years, and I think that's what allowed me to really climb the ladder within that club. And then you also have to bring a fresh perspective to the clubs that you're a part of. I think, showing up, coming to the meetings, I think that's the baseline, but then if you want to really obtain that leadership role, it's taking that initiative to start something new or to bring a new dimension to the club to therefore earn that role in the eyes of whoever the advisor is. And just to give you a quick example, in newspaper club back in high school, I digitized the school paper, which is what allowed me to segue myself into becoming editor-in-chief. And I think it really just started from freshman year, and it started from the initiative that started, which allowed me to do well in that club.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Gohar gave a great answer, and I also think that the more you get engaged with the other club members, then you will kind of gain this reputation for being very active and able to understand what the club needs as part of being a leader if you do get that position. So I think that's a really important reputation to build. Okay. Yes, another person or question from the audience? Sure.
Okay, so I'm still not exactly sure what I want to exactly study in college, and I was wondering how you guys chose your interests and what you want to do as a career when you grow up.
Okay, great question, especially because it's one of our later questions in PowerPoint. So the question is, how do you choose your major when you're unsure, and how do you approach finding your career when you grow up? So for me, I made a video covering my decision, but it's because I chose chemical engineering because I really liked AP chemistry and math. So I thought that I could marry the two and use it in a very versatile way, whether it's in biotech, medicine, or environmental science. However, that's not really the right way to think about it. It's not really taught in school, but you should really consider what career your personality is suited for, not just what subjects you want to study. Because I don't use a single thing that I learned in college, from lecture. And if I did do a chemical engineering job right now, I still would barely use the things that I learned in the textbook. So it's really about what the job you want would have on a day-to-day basis, what kind of tasks that would involve. So with that being said, even if you pick a major like I did, which you don't really want to use in the future, as long as you gained problem-solving skills and you started building a network, then you can pivot to something else, given that you really just put in the effort to learn about that new field. It's really never too late, and if you want to switch to something like computer science, you can always do a boot camp, you can use online resources. There are just many, many ways with technology right now that you can kind of design the new career you want.
I think that perfectly really summarizes how I'd approach that as well. And I'll also add one other element, which is that you don't have to rush into it. So for example, in college, one of my friends changed his major, I would say, 3 to 4 times, and he didn't really find it until he was a junior in college, which was, granted, it was a little bit late, but even when you get to college, for example, you don't have to declare your major right away. They'll give you the first year, like freshman year, to try different classes and then say, okay, this is what I want to major in. But the fact that you're thinking about it so young is, first of all, very impressive. And I think what you can do in the meantime is just to try out as many different activities, hobbies, clubs as you can, and see where your interests lie. It'll take time, but I think you'll figure it out.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
What teachers would you say should be writing your college like the letter of recommendation?
That's a great question. So the question was, which teachers should be writing your letters of recommendation? So I recommend that you have one humanities teacher and one STEM teacher write your recommendation letters. I also recommend that you ask teachers from junior year, ideally maybe sophomore year if you can't find someone from junior year, but freshman year tends to be a bit too late. One other quick note on the recommendation letters is try not to include too many. Sometimes students will ask additional teachers or they'll ask different mentors or coaches, but those additional letters tend to sound very similar to the first two. So what I recommend is just stick to two, one STEM, one humanities, ideally later in high school, and you should be set. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was basically a great answer. Yeah. One more question from the audience.
What was your study schedule for your just for outside these exams? Your study schedule for your SATs?
So for my standardized, so the question was, what was my study schedule for standardized testing? For me, I leaned heavily on online platforms where they can basically give you study plans depending on what date you set your test date as. So I basically made that come out to reviewing about 20 minutes per day. And I did that relatively consistently, but it doesn't have to be every single day. I think the key of having a good study schedule is that you don't think of it as set in stone. It's really important to be flexible. If one day I miss studying, then I'll do a little extra the next day. But just keeping your brain refreshed, because it's like a muscle, right? Really think of studying as a muscle, where if you stop using your muscles for a while, it's going to take a lot more effort to try and bring it back up to that strength.
Yeah, I would say my study schedule, I think the key is to make sure that you just give yourself enough time. Many students will start cramming for their SATs or for these standardized tests maybe just a couple weeks before they have to take them. I would say for these major standardized tests, the key is to start preparing, I would say, at least a couple months in advance, and that should really help you make sure that you do well in these exams.
So move back to these.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So tips on studying for college. So college compared to high school is much more hands-off. You will not have someone who is checking in on you to check if you're studying on time or if you're doing the things you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do them. I would say in college you have to leverage the resources that are around you, because you're going to have way more resources than you do in high school or even in middle school. For example, in college you'll find that your professors host office hours, your college probably has some sort of free tutoring center. There are an abundance of resources in college that are there to support you academically. And so I recommend that, first of all, you figure out what they are your freshman year of college, and that second, you also leverage them as much as you possibly can, because they truly are incredibly helpful. For example, in office hours, sometimes your professors might just give you the answers to the homework or problems. Like that would sometimes happen whenever I would go to office hours. So these resources are great, and I definitely recommend that you leverage them to the max when you get to college.
Yeah, for sure. TAs, sometimes if you ask them for help and then you say you still don't understand it, eventually they might just write down the whole answer on the board. And it's not really something that you should feel bad about to ask for help. I think it's really important to not feel too much pride, I feel bad about asking for help all the time, right? Because in college your workload is going to be so high, so whenever you can get a solution, still learning of course, but quicker, then you should definitely take that opportunity. It's not worth staying up an extra 3 hours to try and figure it out on your own. and potentially be going like completely the wrong direction. So I think that you should leverage resources like Gohar said and find a study group. So that's what I found super effective. Like when I studied chemical engineering, our requirements for graduation were the highest and we had really tough like workloads. But our class actually got the reputation for being the most on top of our work, and that's because we scheduled a study session before the set was due every single week. So at that time, we helped each other to always have our stuff done like 2 days in advance. Okay. Awesome, so the next question, how to study with bad mental health? Okay, this is a tough one, but my initial reaction is to find maybe the root cause of mental health, because often when we have problems in our studying, it's not actually study problems, but it's personal problems outside of studying that can affect them. So no matter how many tips you get about like active recall or using the Feynman technique, if you are not in a mental state to utilize them, then you're probably not going to do well. So I can really say that I reframed my mindset towards studying and what I have to do as something that I get to do. And when you use a positive mindset toward what you should do as something you want to do for yourself and for your future, you will do everything happier and better. So with everything, just like keep a positive mindset, and to do that, like find the root cause of the mental health problem. And I think understand that you are in control of tackling whatever is affecting your mental health. Like I know sometimes whatever the situation is, I don't know it specifically, it could feel a little hopeless, but if you are creative and you try to like problem solve, this is a great lesson that will make you stronger after you get through it.
So again, I think Amy addressed that perfectly, and truly I don't think I have anything more to really add to that core answer, but I'll give you a brief anecdote about my freshman year in college and sort of the impact that had on my mental health. So first month or so of college, it was great, right? Really exciting to be in a new space, but at the same time, surrounded by some of the brightest people I had ever met in my life. And there was like this really looming sense of imposter syndrome. A lot of the time I was questioning whether or not I deserved to get in, whether I deserved to be in the classes with these same students. And it was a tough time for me because high school was super easy, college was just way more difficult, and I was like, did I make a mistake by coming here? But I think, as Amy touched upon, for me, finding the root cause was really understanding how I can improve my own study techniques. Even though I felt like I knew what I was doing in high school, it wasn't until college when I realized that, I can lean more on support systems, I can ask more help, and that's totally fine and totally okay. Whereas in high school, I had this mindset of, oh no, I gotta do it alone to make sure I get the highest grade. But in college, I leaned much more into this collaborative mindset that made studying a lot easier and helped me alleviate the stressful state of mental health. Best organization tips. So I think I won't beat this down too much because I feel like I've answered this in one way or another several times tonight, but I am a huge fan of just so throughout high school, used Google Calendar, Todoist a ton, and then in the past several years I've been using Notion to really just keep track of all of my responsibilities. So I'll really just leave it at that. Make sure you go into the new school year having some sort of system set up, a digital system that can help you stay on top of not just homework assignments and tasks and quizzes, but then also the other elements of your life that you also want to take care of. For example, fitness, health, spending time with family. Make sure you have a place where you're keeping all of that organized.
Yeah, I feel like another aspect of organization that is important is also your habits. So when you form good habits, you don't have to think about being organized or on top of things. So for example, if you like sit down at your desk and you know your routine is to like right away, I'm going to set this up, I'm going to take out my folders, I'm going to review my planner, and then for math, I know I'm going to use like Thea to study it. Then that is your routine that you will always go through, so you can use less mental space on like how to study each thing, right? So then for each subject, if you have a go-to routine, that is also part of organization. And so it's to really form those habits. And that also applies to when you're in school as well. Like when you have downtime in class, organization is also your reaction when you have downtime is to pull out your homework instead of pulling out your phone. So I think it's really important to be mindful of how you're allocating your time throughout your day. And when you have habits, it's much easier to do that. Okay, awesome. So what's a really good way to take notes quickly? Personally, I prided myself on being a very fast writer, but my notes are also very messy. There's a lot of study videos that have very beautiful handwriting, and I'm definitely not one of those. So the first thing is just don't have the pressure to make your notes pretty or colorful or bubbly. You know, like it can, all you need to do is for yourself to understand it. What I like to do also is to use a lot of shorthand. So I made a video about all the shorthands I used, but like for and, like I would write an ampersand, and it seems very small, but the time you save from that really adds up. So that's kind of what I recommend. Another hack is to ask for PowerPoint notes from your teacher before lecture even starts. So then you can actually listen and absorb the information as they're going through it. And then you can annotate on the side for any extra thoughts that you have to understand it in your own words.
Yep. And then to add to that, I would also say don't feel compelled to write everything down. I think sometimes students will focus too much on writing down every single word their teacher or professor says, but then in that case, you're not really listening to what they're actually saying. You're just transcribing the lecture, and that's not really a form of learning. So in addition to using shorthand, which I 100% recommend, I also recommend maybe just trying to take fewer notes, which sounds a little counterintuitive, but maybe every few seconds, just try to parse what it is your teacher just said and then write it down in your own words in a more concise fashion. And then, of course, after class, you can always do a second pass where you're cross-referencing the PowerPoint slides or the lecture recording and adding any details that you might miss. How to get rid of distractions. Oh, this is a big one. Okay, so the truth is I think we're all distracted by our phones, first and foremost. I think that's the number one distraction that's holding us back in almost every aspect of academics or our extracurriculars. So I'll just leave it with a couple quick tips. First of all, if you haven't already, try to set time limits. It's what I do to make sure that I'm not just scrolling through social media endlessly every single day. I also recommend that you use focus mode on your iPhone, which can help block out any notifications from apps or people while you're working. And then there's this other third weird tip that some people have been recommending that I've tried. Personally, it didn't work too effectively for me, but it's using grayscale mode. And the idea here is to make your phone just less enticing, because I think a huge appeal of using your phone and scrolling through social media is the abundance of colors and stimulation that it gives you, but turning on grayscale mode, well, it sort of makes it a little bit more boring and it can help you stay off a bit more, but I feel like the results there vary a little bit.
Yeah, I know that a lot of students, whether it's in person or on my YouTube, say that a lot of these tips for staying off their phone don't really work for them, and it's because, you know, we can ignore app timers. Like I actually ignore my app timer all the time. So what really helps me is just to go to the root of the problem, or like why we feel so compelled to use our phones, right? Often it's boredom. So what I think really helps is to have this kind of attitude toward life that I have all of this opportunity in front of me, and it's up to me to decide what I do with it. So if you have extra time in front of you, think of what you could be doing that takes off load for later in the week. And like that extra time can be used for, you know, hanging out with your friends, or like learning a hobby or learning a skill, or honestly just anything else that's fun that doesn't involve your phone. And when you get in the habit of wanting to do things that give you value, then I think it'll be easier to stay off your phone. So it's really about, at the end of the day, when you're scrolling, be your own coach and think of it from a third-party point of view, like, hey, I know this is not giving me any value and I'm a valuable person, so I should start treating myself like that. What are some study tips you would give to someone who doesn't have a ton of time to study due to extracurriculars or other commitments? So, giving my plug now, but I have a YouTube video called Efficient Studying, where I showed how to study like the same material but in a shorter period of time. The one thing that comes to mind right now though, that you probably heard this a lot, but you have such a big advantage with AI. Like, it's unbelievable. I was playing around with VIA the other day, and there are games. There's like guess the term games that make learning and memorizing like 5 times faster and more fun. So I think that's a really good way to use that. Like before, I would have to summarize my own notes or make my own quizzes, but now AI can just do everything for you. So it would be like crazy if you don't start leveraging it. Another tip that I used personally in high school was, instead of feeling the pressure to study my notes and understand everything before doing the homework, I would just start doing the homework right away, because that is just learning by doing. And when you learn by doing, the information actually sticks even better.
And then one other element that I would add is, back in school, I would try to leverage almost every single pocket of time that I would have, especially when I was an upperclassman in high school. So for example, if I had even like a 5 or 10 minute break in between classes, I would take that time to maybe answer the first problem of a homework assignment, or to write just the first couple sentences of an essay, so that by the time I got home and had to do those assignments, it didn't feel like I was starting up from scratch, but rather I just had to keep the momentum going. And I would also leverage study halls a ton during high school. I think a lot of students who are ambitious are taking a bunch of AP classes and not taking any study halls whatsoever, but if you are a student with a bunch of extracurriculars, I 100% recommend taking a study hall and using that time to balance out all the work that you have to do. And how do I figure out what I want to major in?
So this one we
pretty much we answered that, yeah. How to start with college planning / picking college essays, applications, etc. Okay, so I think the gist of this question is how to get started with college applications. So I think, based on everyone here, I feel like nobody's at the brink of the college admissions process just yet. So the advice that I would have for you is, first of all, in terms of just majors, again, focus on diversifying your extracurriculars and hobbies to figure out where your interests lie. And then also at this point, you can start thinking about your college list a little bit. I think when I was a sophomore or junior, that's when I started doing some college tours, but I don't think you have to worry too much about the college process yet. It's very much going to be when you're a junior that a lot of that stuff starts to kick into gear.
Yeah, personally, I entered high school and spent my freshman, sophomore, most of junior year not having any idea of what college I wanted to attend, not having any idea of what I wanted to major in. I just focused on, I think, using my time on things that were beneficial and that I was interested in. And then when it came time, like when I really had to figure out what colleges I had to, or I wanted to go to, then I had a clear idea of where my interests would even fit me into. So I think it's like, instead of thinking of the college first, you think of who you are first, and then just seeing what kind of college would kind of amplify your strengths and like get you to where you want to be. Any tips for a great college essay? The first tip I would give is the thumb test. So if you can put your thumb over the name on your essay, and the essay could have been written by anyone else, then that's probably not the best essay that represents you specifically. So think about how many essays that college admissions has to read. It's like thousands. It's very, very tiring for them. So if you were the college admissions essay, what kind of story would you want to read? Like, you want to feel emotion, right? Because emotion makes you memorable. So I think that's how I would approach it. It's like, before you even write the essay, just have the prompts in your head, and as you're going about your daily lives, like something might just hit you, and then that's when your sudden inspiration will make the essay just fall out of you. I think it's really important to not force the story out, but it's to find what speaks to you. And you can only find what speaks to you by knowing the prompts ahead of time and really reflecting in your day-to-day life.
Yep. Also, before we continue, I just want to do a quick time check. Are we okay to?
We're good, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, 10 minutes.
Great. So, any tips for a great college essay? So, the first tip that I would have is to treat it like a story. I think the college essay is different from everything else you've written in high school because everything is either an analytical essay, a persuasive essay, an expository piece. But the college essay is your story, and you should treat it as such, where you have a plot, you have characters, you have setting, and it takes time to really figure out how to tell that story and what you want to tell that story about. I'll also leave you with just one other quick tip, which is don't worry too much about what the admissions officers think. If you try too hard to impress the admissions officers, you will not sound like you in your essay, and that's the whole point of the college essay. They just want a sense of your personality, your character, what you care about, and if you're throwing in a bunch of like plethoras and myriads and trying to sound more academic, that's just going to turn admissions officers away. So what I recommend is try to use humor, be vulnerable, use contractions, make your essay feel more like a diary piece so that admissions officers feel like you're being genuine with them instead of just trying to impress them. How can I show top schools leadership skills? That's a great question because I think a lot of people think about leadership in terms of just clubs and positions and titles, but you can also forge your own leadership path and show leadership in what you do outside of school. So for example, back in high school, I didn't really have too many flashy leadership roles. A lot of what I did in high school was outside of school. For example, I started a bunch of websites, I built a small business, and a lot of these activities were my way of showing colleges, hey, I have the initiative to start something on my own, even if it's not in the traditional way of trying to earn a flashy leadership title.
I think 3 core aspects of leadership to keep in mind are innovation, initiative, and ability to persuade. So that can come in many forms, especially not just as formal leadership positions. So if your school is doing something that everyone complains about, well, there's an opportunity, you know. If you hear someone complain about anything, honestly, like there's an opportunity to initiate something and to make a more quantitative impact. So I think that whatever you do, just try to see what the end result could be. Like, who are you affecting? What might the result look like where you can talk about that as a really amazing like outcome that would not have existed if you did not exist. You need to get excited about like your way of thinking and your perspective and the way you can detect problems, such that, hey, the leadership just means that if I was not here, like this would not have happened. You know, like look, that's how amazing it is. So I think having that perspective makes you more excited about showing leadership too, instead of just thinking of it as, oh, I need to show leadership because colleges want that, you know. Okay, how to start a passion project, how to find motivation to learn something you don't like. So I think the first question was kind of covered by both of our answers about leadership. So for the second one, how to find motivation to learn something you don't like. There are plenty of things I had to study, or I'm sure like Gohar had to study too, that we didn't like. Like I really hated learning history, but at the end of the day, so I'm gonna wait for the siren to go by. It's New York. So I really dislike learning history. So for that, I just have to think of my end goal, because at the end of the day, I still wanted an A in history. So that just means like I have to remember that not everything in life is going to be fun. Like we should not expect everything in life to be fun, because that's only a recipe for you to say, I'm going to only do well in the things that I enjoy. To stand out and to do well, we have to understand that there are things that we are not going to feel motivated in, but by pushing yourself and having the drive is what will make you get ahead of other people, to say the least, right? Like, because not everyone will be willing to do the hard thing. Like, think about this concept. Like, people will be jealous of you for the result you have, but they will never be jealous of the work you got to put in, right? Or like you had to put in. So if you think of it that way, then I think it's a lot easier to do the things that don't get you excited intrinsically.
I think Amy just did a perfect job really capturing the mindset that you should go in with when trying to study something you don't like. As someone who also does not like history, I think I really had to reframe the way that I studied to make myself enjoy it more. So for example, this is kind of funny because in my next video I really dive into this pretty deeply. It's called like how to trick your brain to enjoy studying, so it's all in there if you're interested. But I'll just leave you off with one high-level tip. Just pretend that you care about the subject. Try to assume the role of someone who is the super accomplished in that field, and that mindset might help you feel like that's a subject that you genuinely care about and are having fun studying. So this sounds a little cheesy, sounds a little corny, for example, but for example, while I was doing physics at MIT, super brutal, was not having a fun time, but I imagined, I was like, oh my god, just pretend you're like Good Will Hunting and you're solving this equation right here, and you're making like crazy strides in the field of physics, and just imagining that you're some sort of like mad scientist. I don't know, it helped me just get more immersed in the work that I was doing, and just having that mindset shift, regardless of the subject that you're in, can make studying feel a bit more fun. But more concrete tips coming in the next video, so don't worry.
Okay.
All right, cool. Any questions from the audience?
Does every high school, is every high school open to dual enrollment?
Not every high school. It really depends on the district that you're in, but if you have the opportunity to take dual enrollment, AP, IB, whatever it is, I'm assuming everyone here seems extremely ambitious academically, and I'd recommend those are resources that you definitely leverage.
Yeah, any other last minute? Yeah.
What are some games that you guys think we should play between studying just to like keep our minds elastic to remembering information and studying for long periods of time?
So the question is, what games do you recommend in between studying to keep your brain active? I think that studying is already a lot of brain power, so I didn't necessarily do like extra games that tested my brain, but I played sports. So basketball, tennis, it's a lot of strategy, a lot of different parts of your brain are being used, which I think was a perfect complement to take a break from my studies. And it's really healthy too. So I think that doing a sport is definitely, or like music too. It's just like a way to keep your brain active, and it's also at the same time a break from reading textbooks or like doing your homework.
Yep. Any other questions? Yep. There.
So would you say like colleges would like an applicant that has a high achieving award or like just an impactful like accomplishment, or would they like an applicant who writes a very meaningful just like a really good essay?
Got it. So the question is, would colleges prefer an applicant who has a very stellar award or someone who writes a meaningful and moving essay? And what I've seen, surprisingly, time and time again at top schools is, assuming you have the baseline credentials, right? Assuming you have the academics, maybe a few extracurriculars that stand out, maybe not like an international or national level award, it's the essay that eventually moves and sways admissions officers. The essay is coupled with the interviews and letters of recommendation. It's really the soft factors that you have to lean into, assuming you have all like the stats and quantifiers in your application.
Okay, another question from the audience. Yeah, in the back.
Apologies for the question for us previously. How to stop procrastinating and start putting in the work the best way?
A very common, hard question. How to stop procrastinating and start putting in work in the best way. So I talk a lot about mindset, which I won't bore everyone with and repeat, but something I like to do is trick myself by getting stressed about being stressed. Like if I procrastinate, I know I'm gonna get even more stressed later. So by forcing myself to do the work like immediately, it's just like knowing that this will make me less stressed in the long run. It's kind of like being so afraid of the procrastination consequence, and also like if after you, and also after you procrastinate and you like had to stay up like really late, like remember that really sad feeling staying up that late and be scared of it. And so that's kind of how I think about it.
Any other questions?
what if you're like stuck in like one group? You're in a group in a club. You're running out of ideas. You don't have any sources. So for this robotics club, you're out of any ideas. You're out of any resources, but you want to do something that's true. What are any ideas or resources that you can make use of?
So the question is, what if you're part of a club and you have no resources and you're running out of ideas? How can you still like make an impact outside?
Sorry?
So the question is essentially, how can you make an impact without resources? So if you have nothing that you can really lean on within that club, I recommend that, first of all, you can always take it, this might sound a bit too specific, but you can always take it to your school's administration. I think, or your student government, for example. I think your administrators are there to support you in your academic endeavors and to make sure you have the resources, the tools to do well in what it is that you want to do. I'm also assuming that your robotics team has an advisor, and that's someone that you can also definitely talk to make sure that they can allocate resources more appropriately to make sure you can accomplish what it is that you want to do. And then I also recommend that you make sure that your voice is heard in terms of where you want to take the club. I think to have a lot of ideas is fantastic, but I think the students who truly stand out are the ones who voice their ideas and try to move the needle, even if they're limited in some capacity. But those would be my 3 tips. Yep.
Okay, on to the concluding questions. What was the key moment that helped you become who you are today? For me, I don't think it was a key moment, but it was when I was working in my first job as a management consultant and trying to do YouTube at the same time. I was really sad about management consulting, like every day, like the grind of that job. I had to work way longer than a 9 to 5 and then doing things that I personally didn't find very important. So it's by thinking back and trusting my own judgment that if I'm upset about something, there's a reason. There's nothing wrong with me. What's wrong is the situation I'm in. And because I loved creating so much and helping students, the contrast just made it obvious that like if this is bringing me this much joy and I'm willing to stay up late by my own choice to work on these things, then that is definitely the direction I should go. Like we should not resist what calls to us.
I would say that moment for me came in middle school when I decided that I wanted to do what I love and value that over the opinions of others. So in middle school is when I had my first foray into computer science and web development, and it was in middle school that I actually started my first YouTube channel. And while in that moment it was very atypical or weird and something that maybe people were a bit judgmental of, I followed my heart in that situation, leaned into what I truly enjoyed doing, and pursued it not only throughout middle school, but high school, and then college, and even past college today. Like, I still make YouTube videos. And I think that defining moment really came early on in my life, though it's hard, because I think when you try to do something different, when you try to forge your own path, there's always going to be pushback, even from the people closest to you. And while it might feel uncomfortable at first, if you keep moving along, you will eventually find success. What is one advice to give if you want to change the world? Wow, that is, that's a big final question right there. I would say, think. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. So part of it is to, again, follow your heart, but then also, at least in my perspective, like think about what your younger self wanted or would want. A lot of what I do today is rooted in trying to help high school Gohar and what high school Gohar could have benefited from had he had the resources around him. So when I was growing up, for example, nobody was really there to tell me how to apply to college or how to navigate college life or how to do all of these things. And so the way that I approach trying to leave an impact on the world is trying to help that younger self who felt a little bit lost and felt like you could use some extra help.
The only people who have ever changed the world are those who had the courage to try. Changing the world is very, very hard, and I think it's kind of a lot of weight to put on your shoulders if you hope that's the legacy you want to leave. So how I think of it is that you were born with a certain set of strengths, with backgrounds and experiences, and all of that is valuable for you to change some corner of the world, right? It doesn't have to be the whole world, but you are already set up to affect this area that you are most equipped to affect. And the butterfly effect is real, where like maybe right now we are, for example, affecting students primarily, right? Like that's not necessarily changing the world, but we hope that with this new generation of everyone in here being so wonderful and hopefully being inspired, that you will go on to become amazing like innovators and like lawyers and like engineers, right? And then you will go on to make your own impact. So don't feel too much pressure about like affecting everything. It's about using your strengths and then knowing that that will carry farther and farther down the line.